It's been almost a year since Murakumo last time got its support and almost destroyed the meta. So let's see what they got in store this time. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome to the very first set review for V-BT09 Butterfly the Moonlight. And today we're gonna tackle Murakumo as the very first set to take a better look at all the cards for this particular set. Murakumo once again got a new boost to their multi-copy strategy, only this time they're being led by a different unit. It's the return of Stealth Rogue Yasuie. And interesting enough, he immediately returns with two different forms than just the typical one main unit that we've seen with most GR retrains. So there's a lot to take in this set, because not only did we get Yasuie support, we also got some interesting archetype support for the Dueling Dragon archetype. So with that said, let's jump straight into this set review and take a look at all the new cards from Murakumo, as there is, as always, a lot of interesting stuff happening within this ninja clan. Of course, we're gonna start off with the reprint triggers, and Murakumo got two different reprints, but reprint triggers are always gonna be a 1-star for me because they're just generic reprints that doesn't really mean anything for the clan. Then, within that same breath, they also got a new heal trigger, but that's just a different type of reprint, as we have Stealth Fiend Bamboo Fox. So just like the other ones, it's gonna be a 1-star. Now this set also provides a new trigger, which is a third draw trigger in the likes of Stealth Fiend Wing. And this is gonna be a 3-star, as it allows Murakumo to have a bit more diversity in their trigger pool. Now the last new trigger that we're gonna get in this set is the brand new Critical Sentinel trigger for Murakumo, and in their case that's Stealth Rogue of Fiendish Blade Masamura. And this is gonna be a 5-star card for me, as it's just as good as all the other Critical Sentinel triggers, as it opens up so much possibility in deck building strategies. Now with the triggers behind us, we also got a new starter in the likes of Stealth Dragon Adoba Spike. And this is once again a 1-star card for me, as it's basically a reprint with a different skin and name attached to it. Now to round up this generic support or the generic stuff out of the way, we got a new type of vanilla, which is a grade 2 12k vanilla, and that is Stealth Dragon Shuratoguro. And this is, just like most vanilla cards, a 1-star card for me, as it is not really that great, and probably nowadays with all the powerful cards out around, vanillas are probably not that special anymore. Now before we get into the typical skills we would see on Murakumo cards, there are two interesting cards in this set that have an interesting effect. And the first one I want to talk about is a new grade 1, which is Stealth Rogue of Carnival song Miyagiku. And Miyagiku has the ability act on record circle once per turn, cost, rest this unit, draw a card, and discard a card from your hand. If Stealth Rogue of Carnival song Miyagiku was discarded, stand this unit. So this is basically a cycle effect that we can use on demand turn after turn, as it's an act ability instead of an on-place effect. So depending on what type of playstyle you play, and if you need specific combo pieces, or you're an OTK strategy in premium for example, then this could be a nice addition to your deck to increase the consistency, as it allows you to go faster for your deck to dig for your pieces. The fact that it can stand itself potentially allows you to also use it for a bit more aggressive plays. So overall I think it's a solid 3-star card. It's not the most amazing card, but it's an interesting consistency piece that is a bit better than most cycle cards out there, as those cards either force you to pay a certain cost beforehand, or they're just a one-off done all with an on-place effect. This can at least give you more value over multiple turns, and this thing is on a grade 1 unit that allows it to be used a couple of times before the game ends. Then the second card that I wanted to highlight is a grade 3 common card, which is Covert Demonic Dragon Fiamel Vudo. And its ability is auto record circle. When it attacks, cost counter +1. This unit gets power plus 10k until the end of the battle. At the end of the battle, draw a card and retire this unit. So it's in a grade 3 with a pseudo cycle effect, as you retire itself for the draw, but it's mainly a more aggressive stand, as it's on an on-attack skill, and it gains an additional 10k power. Now is this all that great? Not necessarily. It doesn't have a gift marker, it's on a grade 3, and it costs a counterblast. It is a nice 22k beater, which could help you to be a bit more aggressive, but it's definitely not one of the most powerful cards out there, and for that I'm gonna give it 2 stars. But the reason why I wanted to highlight a little bit is because it can interact with another card that we're going to talk about later in this video. So keep this card in the back of your mind while we're discussing the rest of the card, because he will come up sooner than later. Now, with those two cards discussed, we're going to dive in a couple of cards that have the generic multi-name strategy or multi-name mechanic, which we're used to with Murakumo. And the first one that's going to lead the charge is a very disappointing triple R, as we've got this grade 2 Demon Claw Stealth Rogue Yoi Togi. And Yoi Togi's abilities are continuous on Vanguard Circle. During your turn, all Demon Claw Stealth Rogue Yoi Togi on your Vanguard Circle and Rearguard Circle gets power plus 3k. This basically turns all those units into 12k attackers. It doesn't really make magic numbers, it doesn't really help anything. Yes, with an 8k booster that makes it 20k column, so against force it hits magic, but that's not good enough. And the fact that it only works on Vanguard Circle means that this skill is only active for one single turn. Once you go into grade 3, this skill is basically effectively useless, and for a very specific moment in game, this isn't that strong enough to justify such a skill. Now, it also has a secondary effect, which makes it somewhat playable, as it's auto on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. When placed from hand, costs Counter Blast 1 and Soul Blast 1. Search your deck or drop zone for up to 1 Demon Claw Stealth Rogue Yoi Togi, call to the Rearguard Circle, and if you search your deck, shuffle your deck. So if you write it, you can call another copy, so you have two 12k beaters and potentially two 20k units if you have an 8k booster behind both columns. Now, it's overcosted with the Counter Blast Soul Blast. We've seen this like in the very first wave of support from Murakumo, which then wasn't good and isn't good now 2 years later or almost 3 years later. So yeah, it's not that great. The only upside this card has is that it can also call from the drop zone, meaning every single copy in your hand is basically 2 units onto the field if you can pay the cost. But the cost makes it not that great. So for that, I can only give it 2 stars. It's the fact that it can call from the drop zone and potentially can turn them into 12k beaters bumps it up from a 1-star to a 2-star, otherwise it was completely useless. Now the next card is a new grade 1, which is Inexhaustible Stealth Rogue Tokitsune. And Tokitsune has the ability Continuous on Rearguard Circle. This unit gets power plus 5k for each Inexhaustible Stealth Rogue Tokitsune on your other circles. So once you have 1 on the field, it doesn't gain power. If you have 2 on the field, both of them gain an additional 5k power, so they turn into 10k units, which can be nice boosters. If you have a third one, then they all get an increase of 10k, so they're 15k. What's interesting enough is that this skill is continuous active during both players' turns. So if you have multiple copies on the field, they become pretty high numbered, so they're not that easy to remove with just brute forcing attacks into them. So that gives them some sticking power to the field, but not the most amazing kind of part. But because it's a grid 1, means it can be an active booster as well as an attacker, and seen as the Murakumo has a lot of options to copy units with their name, so you can effectively cheat out more than the maximum 4 copies you can play in your deck, means this could potentially be a very strong booster or beater in the right circumstances. Now the sad part is that this card specifically states the name that's written on the card instead of just the name that this unit has, meaning it doesn't synergize with Yuga. If that was the case, this card would be insane. Sadly, that's not the case, so for that I will only give it 2 stars, as it has some interesting applications, but definitely is not one of the most strongest cards out there. Now in the grade 2 department, we have Stealth Rogue of Intangibility Kuninaga, and its abilities are Continuous on Rearguard Circle. If you have another unit with the same card name as this unit, now this in itself is already a lot better, because now if its name changes, with Yuga for example, it can still give other units with the Yuga name this effect. And that effect is, this unit cannot be chosen by your opponent's card abilities and get power plus 5k. So basically, if you have another copy of himself on the field or a unit with the same name as this unit, then this particular one cannot be chosen by card effect, and it gains an additional 5k power, meaning it turns into a 14k beater. So this already has not only a better skill condition, but has also better sticking power on the board, because it is a higher base power, so it's harder to remove with just brute forcing, but it also cannot be chosen by effects, so it's already immune to certain control effects. So that's also a lot better. Now, is this the most amazing type of card? Not really, it's just a generic beater that has some sticking power to the board, and the condition is relatively easy to fulfill, but But if this applies to your opponent's turn to give it the sticking power that you need, then something like Hyuga don't really work, as those names changes the moment your turn ends, so you're forced to have actual 2 copies of this card onto the board. So with everything in mind and how this card functions, I will give it a 3-star rating. It's an interesting card. It can be used as a grade 2 unit for just a generic beater with potential sticking power, but the way that it works and how other cards within Murakumo works can sometimes be a bit awkward in the scenario that you hope for its skill to be actually active. Now, another grade 2 which is interesting, as this card is similar to another grade 2 promo which is insanely powerful and pricey at the time of its heyday, is this grade 2 Stealth Dragon Plump Reimu. And its ability is Auto Rigid Circle. When it attacks, costs counter +1, and all of your front row units with the same card name as this unit get power +5k until the end of turn. Anybody that's familiar with Hyuga, back in the day when it was one of the top dogs in the meta, can remember this skill, but it was on a grade 2 promo that uses Soul Blast instead of Counter Blast, and I believe it can target any card, so also the units in the back row. So this is a bit weaker, and it costs a Counter Blast. Now, depending on your deck, which resources you use, this might not even matter all that much, as you might have the open Counter Blast anyways, and maybe Soul is more restrictive. So depending on what you want to do and how your deck want to function, this could actually be a really solid option. And for that, I think it's a solid 3-star card, but with Counter Blast being a little bit more valuable in the clan, forces me to just put it on the 3-star marking and not on a 4-star rating. Now there's one more card that synergized with this particular playstyle, and that is a interesting grade 3, which is Stealth Rogue of Rogue Skills Masunari. And its ability is Auto Vanguard Rigid Circle. At the end of the battle, your Vanguard attacked cost Counter Blast free and Soul Blast free. Grade 3s, choose one of your rearguards and stand all of your rearguards with the same card name as that unit. Okay. This skill in itself, if we're disregarding the entire cost, is insanely powerful because you can combine this with the Hyuga deck, because Hyuga changes everything to the same name. So if you use this ability in a Hyuga deck, you can restand your entire board. And I believe a certain strike in Murakumo already does that to some extent, so it's basically an equivalent to that strike, but in the standard. But the problem is, with this card, is that not only does it already cost free Counter Blast, which hurts a lot, it then also needs to Soul Blast free cards, which also hurts a lot. But then on top of that, it needs to be specifically free grade 3s that you're Soul Blasting, which is just an unmountable cost to even think that you could generate. So that in itself already makes this card unplayable within the clan, and for that I will give it 1 star. The effect is insane, but the cost just makes the entire card just outright garbage, and you cannot even make a physical, actual playable budget deck around it if you wanted it to. It's just not feasible. Now, with those multi-copy mechanic cards out of the way, we're gonna dive into the more archetype-specific cards. But there's one more card that basically is the best archetype support card, as it supports everything within Murakumo, and that is the generic grade 3 searcher in the likes of Gateway, Stealth Rogue, Ataka. And its abilities are continuous Vanguard to Rigid Circle. During your turn, if you have 2 or more units with the same card name as one of your units, this unit gets power +5k. This is a very easy skill condition to fulfill to gain a 5k power, because Murakumo excels in this type of stuff. No matter what type of archetype or budget deck or whatever deck you play, there's some kind of form that will allow you to do this. Now, its second ability is something we already seen many times before, so of course it's Auto Vanguard Rigid Circle. When played from your hand, look at the 5 cards from the top of your deck, reveal the 1 grade 3, one among them, put them in your hand, shuffle the deck, put the card in your hand, discard a card from your hand. Yeah, the generic grade 3 searcher. Now, of course, this is a 5-star card, and with that said, let's move on into the archetype specific support. And the first thing that we're going to look at is the Dueling Dragon archetype support, and we start off with a grade 1, which is Backward Arrestor. Yet again, a brand new arrestor we'd never seen before. And its ability is Auto Rigid Circle. When it boosts right arrestor or left arrestor, if you have a Vanguard with Dueling Dragon in its card name, Soul Charge 1, and the boosted unit get power +10k until the end of that battle. So of course, we now have a boosting arrestor. We already had a left arrestor for the left row, a right arrestor for the right front row, a central arrestor for the back row center column that can attack from the back row, so the only spots left open are the left and right back row circles. So of course, these units work in those particular circles. Now boosting the right arrestor and left arrestor, that's an easy skill condition to fulfill, especially in the Dueling Dragon deck, as you have multiple ways to search out those cards or just specifically superior call them with something like Zanbaku. Now this card alone with a 10k power is quite good because it allows you to finally hit significant numbers within the deck, as it, together with any of those particular grade 2s, can generate 27k columns, as 9 plus 8 is 17 plus a 10 is 27. Now if you boost left arrestor and you use left arrestor skill, that then turns from a 27 into a 32k column, which are pretty big numbers for something like Zanbaku. So we're starting to look really good here. But interesting enough, left arrestor costs a soul blast. Now with backward arrestor, generating soul charge means you can do that turn after turn without losing actual value on your resources, as you generate as much as you use. Now this soul charge also helps with the Zanbaku deck, as Zanbaku itself uses soul blast for its skill, and sometimes you might run out of that soul. So this also helps with that, and you have the chance of potentially soul charging a grade 3, which then could help you set up with Zangetsu or something else. So this, in overall gameplay, is really good, and it's yet again another arrestor which you can superior call with Zanbaku, as he himself is not limited to only superior calling left or right arrestor. So overall, this is a solid 4-star card for me, as it's a really good supporting card for the whole Dueling Dragon arrestor archetype, which is starting to look as a really interesting sub-archetype budget deck alternative. So yeah, give it a go. Now the second and final card for the Dueling Dragon archetype is the new grade 3, which is Dueling Dragon ZANTETHU. And its abilities are continuous and Vanguard circle. During your turn, all of your units with arrestor in its card name get power plus 5k. So not only do you turn all your 9k attackers into 14k attackers, but it also allows you to put extra 10k power on your entire column if you have a backwards arrestor together with whatever arrestor in the front row. So you're starting to generate extremely high powerful numbers, as it could potentially go upwards to 42k power, which are pretty good numbers to make. Now it also has a secondary effect, which is really interesting for the Dueling Dragon archetype, as that effect is act on Vanguard and Vanguard circle once per turn. If you have a Vanguard with Dueling Dragon in its card name, put the top card of your deck into the damage zone, search your deck for up to 2 cards with arrestor in their card name, call them to the Vanguard circle, and shuffle your deck. Do not perform any damage check. So you shoot yourself a damage without actually getting the damage check, so that might sound really bad, but in return, you can superior call 2 of any arrestors to the field. This is amazing for multiple reasons, and it all has to do with Zanbaku, and to some extent even Zangetsu. Let's start with Zangetsu first. Zangetsu doesn't really do anything unless you have left and right arrestor onto the field, as those cards enable Zangetsu to get this full power plays active. It's continuous skill. So if they are removed from the field, you don't really do anything. Now this card in itself already substitutes for both those arrestors. So you can call this thing to the Vanguard circle, use its ability, and immediately superior call left and right arrestor, and your Zangetsu is now at full power. That's incredibly strong, as without those cards in your hands, you basically won't do anything. Now, in that same breath, we can look at Zanbaku and see the same thing. If we don't have left and right arrestor onto the field, and we want to use Zanbaku, we're basically stuck, as we can only superior call 1 unit. And ideally, you want to have a left arrestor already present on the field and then superior call into a right arrestor, so you can then use right arrestor's effect after you use Zanbaku to completely stun lock your opponent in not riding and not standing. Now with ZANTETHU, you can already place that left arrestor beforehand, and because you can superior call 2 units, it allows you then to call either a central arrestor behind your Vanguard, or now a backwards arrestor to make an entire column, which will then hit for a pretty BV number. So this once again allows you to set up that play more easily. But on top of that, we all know that Zanbaku's complete stun lock costs 3 counterblast, which is quite a lot of resources, which your opponent most likely will deny. A good player against a Zanbaku player will not give them that third damage. Maybe 2, but definitely not that third one. So ZANTETHU actually dealing itself a damage, which comes face up by the way, means you then suddenly go from 2 damage to 3 face up damage, and now you can use Zanbaku's main stun lock combo with Right Arrestor. So not only does ZANTETHU allow you to get the full power of Zangeki with a 1 card in hand, it also allows you to set up your Zanbaku play on a much more consistent basis that even can circumvent to some extent your opponent being counterplaying you, as this card now allows you to counterplay your opponent's counterplay. And with this card now existing, anybody that's facing off against Zanbaku can actually not give them more than 1 face-up damage, because if they give them 2, that is basically free. So with that in mind, this is definitely a 4-star card for me. Of course, with everything that I just said, it might sound as a 5-star card, but keep in mind, this is just a supporting unit for the Zanbaku deck. It's not a unit that will win the game on its own. It's in combination with these other cards, and it's seen this as a great free as itself, will hamper a bit on your consistency, on your overall game plan winning your deck. But this is definitely a card you want to be running in a Dueling Dragon archetype. Now, with those Dueling Dragon cards out of the way, let's talk about the main support line, and of course, our main boss unit, which is the brand new Stealth Rogue of Revelation, Yasuie. And we're going to start looking at this new VR beforehand, before we're gonna look at the other cards, so we have a better understanding how everything synergized together. So here we have the brand new Yasuie, and its abilities are act on Vanguard Circle once per turn, cost counter +1 and soul +1, choose 2 of your units, search your deck or drop zone for up to 1 card with the same card name as each of those units, call into the Vanguard Circle, and if you search your deck, shuffle your deck. So we have the same cost as the previous Triple R, which is completely trash, but now instead of 1, we can superior call 2 units, which is much better. And it staining units means that you can copy itself and whatever other unit you have on the field that you want to have secondary copy of. So it's just a generic way to fill the board and be able to attack with at least a couple of attacks. Now, its secondary effect is auto Vanguard Circle. At the end of the battle it attacked, cost discard a card from your hand, write an Ambush Demon Stealth Rogue Yasuie Tenma from your drop zone as stand, and that unit gets drive -1 until the end of turn. So its secondary effect allows it to rewrite another great free from the drop zone to then basically have a restanding Vanguard. Now this is a really interesting thing, as we're going to take a look at the other Yasuie in a moment here, but this is basically a boss unit that allows you to copy multiple cards on the field to set up multiple attacks in the main phase, and then during the battle phase allows you to rewrite a specific unit from the drop zone onto the Vanguard Circle to then swing in twice with the Vanguard unit. And this being an Axel deck also allows you to create an extra Axel circle while doing that mid-battle. And if you use Axel 2, then it also gives you that extra draw, which then compensates for the 2 discards you did to be able to rewrite. So in that case, you will go even with the -1 drive check. So Yasuie is an interesting main boss unit, but we have to take a look at the other support cards to actually understand how powerful this card actually can be. So what is this other Yasuie that we just talked about? Well, let's take a look at that one, as here we have Ambush Demon Stealth Rogue Yasuie Tenma. This great free, also with an Axel marker, has act on Vanguard Circle once per turn, cost counter +1, choose 1 of your units, search your deck or drop zone for up to 1 card from the same card name as that unit, call to the Vanguard Circle, and if you search your deck, shuffle your deck. So it has the exact same skill as the other Yasuie, only it costs a bit less, but it also only have half its power. This in itself isn't really all that great, but it basically allows you to give something if you're stuck on this unit as a first right target, or if you did the superior right and you cannot go to the previous Yasuie anymore. Now the main attraction lies in its secondary effect, which is auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of that battle. At the end of the battle, retire this unit, choose 1 of your opponent's rear guards, and your opponent puts that unit on the bottom of his or her deck. So this is for free a 22k beater that then removes itself from the field, but in return for that, you can then put 1 of your opponent's unit to the bottom of your deck. So you not only get a stronger unit for it, but you also do a 1-for-1 trade with your opponent. That's actually pretty good value for no resource cost at all. And putting it on the bottom of your deck can actually be a bit better in certain circumstances, depending on what type of deck you're facing and what their main strategy or gimmick is. Now, the fact that it also puts itself to the drop zone actually works really well with the main Yasuie, as you can call this thing from your hand to the field, get the attack off with it, and then it puts itself in the drop zone, and then it's ready to then immediately be superior ridden into the battle phase once your Vanguard swings. So that's actually a really nice synergistic play you have with those 2 Yasuies, But that's actually not where it stops, as we're gonna look at some other support cards, which adds on another layer on top of this playstyle. So for me, this is a solid 4-star card. The main value point is in its secondary effect, its rearguard effect that allows you to do the main value plays. But to be honest, its Vanguard skill is kind of lackluster. It's not that great, so if you need to write this thing, it doesn't really do anything as much. It would have been an amazing card if its auto ability was Vanguard as well as rearguard circle skill. Then this card was definitely a 5-star card in my mind, but the fact that it isn't makes it only a 4-star card if I'm gonna be very honest with what we're seeing nowadays with what strong cards actually can do. But a powerful card nonetheless in the right deck. Now the second support card that we have for Yasuie is a archetype specific grade 1, which is Wisteria Flower Style Rogue Takehime. And Takehime's ability is auto on Vanguard Circle. When placed, look at the 7 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 card with Yasuie and its card name from among them, put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. So this is some consistency options that we have for Yasuie as we write this thing. This skill is something we're going to see more often with the future sets, and in most cases they search for a specific grade 2 and a specific grade 3, but as soon as the main deck revolves around 2 specific grade 3s, it just searches for Yasuie as they both have Yasuie in the name. Now this is a nice consistency bump that is just for free if you hit it, and with 8 targets it's very likely that you would hit it. Now the main application for this card lies of course in its secondary effect, which is auto rearguard circle. Once per turn, when your Vanguard with Yasuie and its card name is placed, cost counter +1, choose one of your units, and call up to 1 card with the same card name as that chosen unit from your drop zone to the rearguard circle. So whenever you write in the normal write phase, you can activate a skill to then copy a unit and then call something to the field. But as we just seen, Yasuie can superior write during the battle phase. So of course you want to time this with that superior write engine, so you can then superior call another unit onto the field to achieve even more multi-attacks. But how this card works and the timing of everything works actually really well in favor with Yasuie. Because first you complete the superior write into Yasuie Tenma, and then you can activate this card to choose any one of your units. Now because this thing states units, you can choose the Vanguard once again. So in the ideal situation, you want to choose Yasuie Tenma to get another Yasuie Tenma from the drop zone back onto the field, because that's one of your best attackers that can generate you value for free over multiple turns or over multiple attacks. And with the extra rearguard circle you just opened, you have plenty of room to call this unit on top of somewhere without actually minusing yourself with units onto the field. And having that extra 22k unit that then can remove another unit from your opponent's field gives you so much control options on top of the extra multi-attack that you're doing. Because in this scenario, you already attack probably with a Tenma that removes 1 unit, and then you superior right into the Tenma from your Yasuie, so you have 2 Vanguard swings, and then you recall another Yasuie Tenma to then attack again that will remove 1 more unit from your opponent's field. So once again, this is a perfect card for the Yasuie deck, but the only issue is that it specifically works with Yasuie. Both its skills needs Yasuie to work with, so it doesn't work within any other deck within Murakumo. Of course, no other deck can utilize this card as effectively as no other deck in Murakumo does something like a superior right mid-battle phase. So for that, I think it's a solid 4-star card. It's an amazingly powerful card, but sadly, it's a bit restrictive to the potential it could have within other decks or in future decks. If Yasuie doesn't get more support in the future, this card, just like Yasuie Tenma, will probably be a bit underpowered once we get more and more support for other clans. Now, another card which works with Yasuie Tenma but has the upside to the fact that it's generic and will probably be very playable within any deck that we might see in Murakumo is this grade 2 Unmasked Stealth Rogue Awazu. Because her ability, and yes, it's a her, is auto rearguard circle. When placed, search your deck for up to 1 card, put that into your drop zone, shuffle your deck, and this unit gets that card's card name until the end of turn. So normally in Murakumo, you either want to copy your units and then superior call another identity or another copy of the unit onto the field, so you have multiple copies of the unit onto the field, or you use something like a Metamorphox to just place onto the field and take that name to have pseudo extra copies onto the field. But in both cases, you already need to have that unit already present onto the field to generate more copies. In this case, you don't need that. If you just have this card in your hand, you can copy any name from any card that's already in your deck. So the earlier you play this, the more options you have. And This is incredibly potent within what Murakumo already does, because what you can do is you can call this thing, make it the name from the unit that you actually want, then use any other card that allows you to copy other units, then choose this card, which then has a different name, and then get that unit onto the field. This allows you to cheat out any card. But there's even more layers on top of that, because this card sends that particular copy to the drop zone. So that not only allows you to filter your deck, so it allows you to have better draws as you thin your deck, but it also allows you to get higher chance of getting triggers. So that's already pretty good. But what we've seen just now is that we now also can superior call units from the drop zone. So we can choose the name, put it into the drop zone, and then immediately superior call that unit from the drop zone onto the field. So of course, we can combine this with Yasuie, as we can write normal Yasuie, then call this thing, make it a Yasuie Tenma, so we send the Yasuie Tenma to the drop zone, then use our Yasuie Vanguard to choose itself and this unit, but it's then a Yasuie Tenma, superior call both Yasui's from your deck, not the one from the drop zone, we want to keep it there, to the field, and then we have 4 units in the front row. Then if we have Ataka Hime in the back row, then that means we can set up extra multi-attacks, because we can attack with the Yasuie Tenma, then it sends itself to the drop zone, then we attack with the Vanguard, and then after that attack happened, we can superior at one of the 2 Yasuie Tenmas in the drop zone, and then once that happens, we can use the Ataka Hime to then choose our Vanguard, and then choose the second Yasuie Tenma in the drop zone to then superior call that one onto the field again. This card, together with all the other cards, allows you to do all kinds of intricate combos and options. Now, there's also one more thing that this card can do, which is pretty obvious outside of the Yasuie engine, and that has to do with Shiryuki. Shiryuki is at 1, but 1 is all that we need in combination with Awazu, because we can call Awazu to the field, choose the one of Shiryuki in our deck, send it to the drop zone, and then with whatever Rainy Madame we have, we can get that Shiryuki back into our hand and basically have a search engine for Shiryuki. Which is incredibly powerful, as that means we have more consistent access to that one of Shiryuki. So yeah, Awazu is an incredibly powerful card from Murakumo, and probably will see its way in a lot of different decks. I think it even has options within the infinite loop strategy within the premium landscape, as it allows you to set up more options or more possibilities to get that loop live as consistent as possible. So yeah, Awazu is definitely a 5-star card for me, and is something that Murakumo will be able to utilize for the long haul. Now, there is one more interesting card that I want to discuss, which has a lot of potential and some interesting interactions with the cards within this particular set, which is this grade 1 Flutist Stealth Rogue Kadotsugu. And Kadotsugu ability is on a rearguard circle. At the end of the battle that it boosted a grade 2 or greater rearguard, cost counter +1 and discard a card from your hand. Search your deck for up to 1 card with the same card name as that unit that this unit boosted, call to the rearguard circle without a unit, and shuffle your deck. So the main condition that you need to call to the rearguard circle that's empty tells you that it might synergize with Yasuie, as Yasuie can generate more Axel circles mid-battle, so you probably have empty circles ready for this skill to work with. And that is the case to some extent, but it can also work outside of the Yasuie engine. But if we stick to the Yasuie engine, this definitely has some place within that engine together with Tenma, because this card says at the end of the battle it boosted a grade 2 or higher, then you can copy that unit and superior call something. But interesting enough, it doesn't state you need to choose that unit afterwards. So if that unit already disappeared, you can still copy that unit and call it. So with something like Yasuie Tenma that then retires itself at the end of the battle, you can then effectively just call another one to the field. But how skills work, and you can time them, you can of course, to be safe, activate this one first before you resolve the skill that removes itself from the field. So it can synergize with those units, and even if you have no field open, you can combine this with something like a Yasuie Tenma, resolve the Tenma, it sends itself to the drop zone, then activate Kadotsugu to then call another Tenma to the same circle which the previous Tenma just occupied. So you can do this type of interaction because the way that this particular grade 1 skill is worded. Now, with that same breath, it can also work with the grade 3 common card, which I highlight at the beginning of this video, that at the end, that for a cost of a counterblast could give itself 10k power and then draw a card once it retires itself. Because it retires itself means the circle will open up, and with Kadotsugu, you can then refill that circle with another copy of that particular grade 3. Now, of course, that's the main gimmick that you want to do with this card, but you can also use it just in a generic way that you can combine it with any other grade 2 or grade 3 that you can then call another copy onto another circle that's empty. Now, you will probably won't get the most value in those particular cases, but with Tenma, with that common grade 3, and with the whole Yasuie engine, there is a lot of possibility for this card. And because it's such a generic card, it can work outside of the Yasuie engine and with potential future support for Murakumo, and who knows what this can do in premium Murakumo, I think it's a solid 4-star card. Yes, the cost for the skill might be a bit overcosted with a counterblast and a discard, but the fact that you can get an extra attack out of with a specific combo might grant this enough to be powerful enough to actually be playable. Because the discard might be heavy and all, but what does cards in your hand mean if your opponent doesn't survive till next turn to even do something for you? So yeah, that's for me reason enough to give it the 4-star. Now, with that card out of the way, that means we arrive back at their boss monster, which is of course Stealth Rogue of Revelation Yasuie. And now that we've seen everything in action and how everything works, there is a lot of potential within this card. We have Tenma that allows you to have a strong beater on the rearguard circle that then can send itself to the drop zone, which then set up for the superior right, which makes it a lot more consistent and also easier to fulfill than just outright needing and finding a way to get it to the drop zone. But then the extra layers on top that we find with Takahime, which allows you to do even more multi-calls on top of that. And of course Awazu that can even set up all these kind of crazy plays. And the grade 1 that we just talked about that allows you to do even more multi-attacks. And then of course the generic way that the Yasuie allows you to call multiple copies of whatever unit you want in the field gives this deck so much options and even a lot of aggressive plays with all the extra mid-battle multi-attacking that you can do. So Yasuie is surprisingly enough a very powerful VR. The only issue is, however, what I have with this card is that it is super reliant on another specific grade 3 to utilize its superior right. So if you do not find that card or no other way to get it into the drop zone via some kind of cheating way, then this card doesn't really do anything. And yes, the 2 superior calls are nice, but at some point it won't really matter all that much with other grade 3s that do some crazy things. And on top of that, the fact that this goes into a grade 3, which isn't actually that powerful as a Vanguard unit. Because the problem is, the second Vanguard swing is just 12k. It doesn't gain power. That's the reason why I said that Yasuie Tenma would be incredible if its 10k power with the control effect was Vanguard Circle as well as Rearguard Circle. But now it's just a 12k Vanguard attack. So with everything in mind, and the fact that this is very strict down to what it wants to do, because most cards that are really good are restricted to the Yasuie engine, as well as Yasuie himself that works specifically with Yasuie Tenma, forces me to get this card a 4-star rating. The deck is incredibly powerful, it's really fun, you should definitely not underestimate this, but in combination what we see what other decks can do, and also the future potential of this card, or just the deck in general, it's not on par what the other decks in this particular set already does, but also what decks did in sets beforehand. So that's why I can only give it a 4-star rating for what we see today. And with that, we basically conclude this set review for Murakumo. We've seen a lot of interesting cards, like just generic cards, also a bit of a stinkers with the Triple R grade 2, which just is terrible. But besides that one, the rest of the cards are looking pretty interesting. We have some generic support for maybe budget players that can utilize or just play with. And then on the high end of spectrum here, we've got some really interesting cards that can either make the Yasuie deck look very interesting and has a lot of interesting plays and combos and lines of agency options that you can do to make your plays be a bit more better than just a generic player, but also some really good generic tool options like Awazu that can potentially last for years, depending on which direction Bushiroad is going to take the clan. So with that said, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these cards from Murakumo. Do you think that Murakumo got really solid support and you think they justified what the clan needed in the last year or so? Or do you think that they missed the ball quite heavily and the clan was kind of a bit of a stinker in this particular set? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. As always, I want to thank my Patreon supporters over patreon.com/VanguardInsider for making this video possible, as well as the rest on the channel. You guys are amazing. If you want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.